So, Weil's group of prose texts, Barvy, having repeatedly been called a cycle, has so far not been treated as such, as a cycle, in literary studies. So I will try to throw a little light on this problem here, starting from a short theoretical introduction. We will ask by which main features Barvy can be characterized as a cycle, and what are the consequences for the interpretation of this work. What is the difference between a cycle, for example, a cycle of poems or stories, and a rather free, random assembly of texts, such as an anthology or a collection? In the latter case, the grouping tends to be a more or less external, formal manifestation by which the single text's independence is largely maintained. The texts being connected by only a small number of features largely preserve their textual autonomy, for example, an anthology of love poems. In a cycle, in contrast, the single texts, by their interaction, form a new entity, which has all the features of an autonomous text itself. Accordingly, the single text has the ambivalent status of an autonomous text and simultaneously as the subordinate part of a superior entity, the cycle. Semantically, both states can differ, sometimes even considerably. For example, when a text is ironized in the context of a cycle. An author can aim at creating a cycle from the outset, a priori, or by using already existing texts, a posteriori. On the paradigmatic level, a cyclic connection between texts can be indicated by recurring themes, motives, figures, genres, rhetorical or so-called formal devices. Syntagmatically, the texts can constitute causal or temporal connections, often resulting in a kind of epic relation, the single text forming the rudiments of an action. Barvy belongs to Weil's lesser-known works. In Czech, it was first published in 1946 as a book, and then re-edited as part of Weil's prose collection Hodina pravdy, Hodina zkoušky in 1966. Only recently there has been some research interest in this work. So Hanna Hříbková and Maria Brunova, in their dissertations on Weil, paid much attention to Barvy, particularly in respect of the work's genesis, its background, and its reception. Andreas Ohme, in his interpretation, associates the texts of Barvy with the genres of ornamental prose and ornamental narration. I will follow a somewhat different track, laying the focus on Barvy as a whole, asking where and how a close cyclic connection between the texts can be perceived. Already the exterior fact that the cycle consists of 10 prose texts may not be completely random. As Hanna Hříbková supposes, I quote, the number 10 refers to R10, the resistance group Weil and several persons to whom he dedicated his stories were members of, end quote. In light of the experiences having inspired the texts and, moreover, of the dedications preceding each text to friends from the resistance, including our 10 members, such a congruency seems plausible to me. While intensive and deliberate work on the cycle can also be seen by the fact that with respect to the publication of Barvy, he even rewrote some of his former texts which had got lost during the war. Although we know only little about the cycle's genesis, there is evidence that it was composed as a literary whole a posteriori by the use of texts which had at least partially been written some years before. More important than such exterior features, however, are the interior factors showing the cycle as a meaningful whole, being based on the complex interplay of its single texts. One important factor in Barvy is genre. All the 10 relatively short prose texts are characterized by an overlapping of epic actionality and lyric situativity, respectively reflexivity, which are alternating in dominance. This problem was thoroughly examined by Andreas Ohme. I would like to concentrate on another important factor in the process of cyclicization in the work, its central motive, colors. When we are, before the first reading, faced with the work's title, as well as the titles of the 10 texts, our expectations are probably rather vague. Each title consists of 2 colors. Altogether, there are 12 colors included in these 10 titles. For more details, you can see the scheme above. There are pairs expressing culturally well-known relationships of contrast or complementarity, such as černá a bílá or stříbrná a zlatá. But in most cases, for example, zelená a rudá or fialová a černá, the assembly does not comply with a transparent principle. So the reader's curiosity about the text is aroused. Within the text, the title colors can play a certain role, although we cannot recognize a consistent pattern. With an imprisoned partisan's act of self-sacrifice in favor of a suspected woman, text 1, Zelená a rudá, introduces one of the predominant subject areas of Barvy besides the Holocaust, the communist resistance in the time of the Nazi occupation. Green is the color both of the toads, ropuchy, signifying the hidden SS men, and of the slope where the partisan and the woman used to date in former times. Similarly, rudý, bright red, has negative and positive connotations here. The red flames stand for danger and doom, whereas the woman's red dress remembers both of eroticism and communism. The 2 colors have no prominent, but rather a subsidiary function in the text, so that the question of the relationship between the text and the title remains uncertain. Text 2, Černá a bílá, is about a death march leading from a Bavarian town to Czechia. the homeland of the protagonist, a concentration camp detainee. The title colors express no contrast here, as might be expected. The white heaven and black soil of the familiar Czech homeland are instead in marked contrast to the red heaven and purple soil of hostile Germany. The subject of Žlutá a modrá, text 3, is a transport of Czech Jews to the Ukrainian town of Berdichev. In the beginning, the title colors, corresponding with the Ukrainian national colors, are used for describing the Ukrainian nature. I quote, "The shadow is bluely changing into the yellow of the early evening," end quote. In the end, however, the two colors appear in exclusively negative contents being associated with the Holocaust. Yellow bones, blue grease, and yellow glycerin. In text 4, the colors šedá a fialová are connected with the protagonist, a steel worker who is shown in a partisan action. Gray, the color of the steel treated by him, is associated with strength, hardness, and resistance, and violet is the laboring steelworker's face. A somewhat different case is text 5, hnědá a bílá. It is the first one in which death does not occur, although it threatens. A partisan fleeing from his pursuers' bloodthirsty hound dogs reaches the rescuing boundary river virtually in the last moment. Both colors are connected with the hostile scenery. White with the landscape and atmosphere, white snow, white silence, even white darkness. Brown with the beasts chasing the partisan. Brown paws, brown fur. In the next three texts, we find only a few color adjectives. In text 6, about the selection of Jews before going into a concentration camp, žlutá a černá are the colors of the humiliating badge that Nazis forced Jews to wear. In text 7, the colors express the contrast between a nature idyll, violets blooming in the meadows, and the black house amidst the landscape, a partisan's hideout being destroyed by the Nazis. A special case is text 8, žlutá a zelená, addressing the secret campaign of a female partisan who is duped by traitors and has to go to her death. There is no single color adjective all over the text, so that we can only speculate what the title colors refer to. As Maria Brunova assumes, yellow could be the color of the stars lighting the way of the women to their execution. Green maybe relates to the reptiles representing the traitors whose main feature is envy. Červená a modrá, number 9, is a strongly lyrical narrative about a group of friends fleeing from the Nazis to Paris, but after a while remorsefully returning to the homeland, where they are murdered. The bluish shadows of the distances are connected with the longing for a good life in freedom and independence. In contrast, red is the color of the beads of the rosary adhering the men to their native lands and their families. In the last text, Both colors, stříbrná a zlatá, characterize things and phenomena signifying change. From animals to human beings, from inferiority to rebellion, from oppression to freedom. The color adjectives abounding in this lyrical text enter innumerable word combinations heralding a new, better time. For example, the silver trumpet, the silver river gleaming in the night, the silver of hope, the gold of the sunbeam, the golden bridge, the gold of belief. Stříbrná a zlatá takes an important position within the cycle. It is the only text not being based on an epic occurrence. The conspicuous repetitive structures of this lyric prose show a clearly hymnic tendency. Although the horrors of the Holocaust are present here, the text's message is hopeful. Due to the text's final position, this message also impacts all the other texts, thus giving the whole cycle a positive ending. Barvy, as a cycle, for the most part complies with paradigmatic principles, but leads to a finale with a strong syntagmatic position. In other words, whereas the first 9 texts are mutually interchangeable, stříbrná a zlatá might not be shifted to another position without the consequence of changing the cycle's meaning. The crucial paradigms Barvy is based upon are war, Holocaust, and resistance, particularly from a Jewish standpoint, the relationship between humans and the natural environment, animalization of humans and anthropomorphization of animals, patriotism. All these are recurrent elements interconnecting the single texts and thus contributing to the formation of what we can call a cycle. Again, however, the question respecting the function of the main motive, the color, in this process appears. Here I have tried to give a short synopsis of cycle colors in the cycle. It is impossible to identify a consistent, continuous function of the colors appearing in the cycle. Partially, they designate a mere optic quality of objects, natural phenomena, and the like. For example, zelená stráň, modrá mlha, or hnědé tlapy. In a number of cases, symbolic and or emotional connotations join in. I mentioned the example of Rudi Schartek. Then again, we find colors used in pure symbolic or emotional contexts. Bílé ticho, zlato víry. The same color can mark different phenomena, can be positive and negative even within a single text. Our expectations with regard to the color's meanings, functions, and hierarchies are repeatedly dashed. And in the end, we face our cycle somewhat baffled, still not knowing why the work is entitled Barvy. But here, in my opinion, could lie, could lie a key to the cycle. Proceeding from the recipient's expectations, the title Barvy is as vague and unspecific as the titles of the single prose texts. Thus, the reader's curiosity about the text is content and meaning is excited at the maximum. Here, he or she will find out that there is a great variety of functions the colors fulfill, but not consistent, homogeneous concept linking them throughout the whole work. The attentive recipient is motivated to a close reading, constantly looking for colors, comparing them, and trying to recognize the system by which they are bound together and the role they play in the thematic profile of Barvy. In doing so, that is, using the colors as some kind of catalyst to the work's deeper meaning, the reader will discover a broad network of semantic and structural interconnections by which the texts about war, Holocaust, resistance, about the worst cruelties, despair, and courage are attached together, forming a new, complex textual whole with a hopeful end. What Weil's famous works show is also confirmed by Barvy. Weil is not only an outstanding documentarist of hard and tragic times, but also a writer of highest literary artistic skills, an important representative of Czech and European modernism. Thank you.